Let me start by saying this: salvage work is supposed to be boring. That is the entire point of salvage work. You find a dead ship, you strip it for parts, you sell the parts, you buy something nice for yourself, and you go home. Nobody warns you that one day you'll float into a wreck and come out the other side questioning every decision your species has ever made about giving up too early. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Rull. I fly a garbage scow with a fusion drive held together by optimism and duct tape, and my co-pilot Yosk has the emotional range of a rock, which is usually convenient, except for days like today. Cursed, Yosk said, staring at the sensor readout. That ship is cursed. Look at it. It's just sitting there. 900 years and it hasn't moved an inch. It's a derelict, Yosk. Derelicts don't move. That's the definition of derelict. I don't like it. You don't like anything that doesn't come with a warranty. The ship in question, human make, according to the hull markings, which meant it was old, since nobody had heard a peep out of Terran space in centuries, was drifting in a dead system with no star worth mentioning, just a husk of a sun and some rocks that used to be planets before something unpleasant happened to them. The hull was scarred but intact. No hull breaches. No signs of battle. Just a big, silent tin can, tumbling slowly end over end like it was thinking about something. Salvage rights, I said, already logging the claim. Free money, Yosk. We cut it open, we grab the good bits, we sell them to some museum that likes old Terran junk, and we're back home before the next tax cycle. Yosk made a noise that I can only describe as the sound a teapot makes right before it screams. Fine, he said. But if there are ghosts, I'm blaming you. There weren't ghosts. There was something worse. We cut through the outer airlock, human tech, primitive by our standards, the kind of mechanical seal you could open with a determined shoulder and a swear word, and the moment the inner door hissed open, the cold hit us like a physical thing. Not surprising. No power, no heat, 900 years of empty space will do that to a ship. What was surprising was the frost. It wasn't just coating the walls. It was coating the walls in patterns, like something had grown there over centuries, crystal formations creeping along handrails and doorframes in slow, patient waves. Pretty, Yosk said, in the tone of someone who did not think it was pretty at all. We moved through the corridors with our suit lights cutting narrow cones through the dark. The ship was in remarkably good shape for something that had been drifting since before either of our species had proper diplomatic relations with anyone. No structural collapse. No debris fields. It was like the crew had just stepped out for a moment and forgotten to come back. Except they hadn't stepped out. We found the first one in a chair in what looked like a common room. A human, or what was left of one after 9 centuries of vacuum cold preservation, mummified, technically, the moisture long since sublimated away, skin gone, the color and texture of old parchment stretched over bone. It was sitting upright, hands folded in its lap, like it had simply closed its eyes and never opened them again. No restraints. No signs of struggle. No burns, no blast damage, no evidence of the sort of catastrophic decompression event that usually explains why a ship full of people is now a ship full of corpses. Okay, I said, doing my best to sound like a professional salvager and not someone whose stomach had just relocated to somewhere around his knees. That's unsettling, but it's also Tuesday. Let's find the bridge. You say that like you know what day it is. I say that because I refuse to acknowledge that I don't. We found 6 more along the way. All of them the same. Seated, composed, peaceful. One was tucked into a bunk with a thin blanket pulled up to its chin, like someone had put it to bed. That one got to me more than I expected. I've hauled a lot of bodies out of a lot of wrecks in my career. Usually they look like something happened to them. These looked like nothing happened to them at all. They just stopped. The bridge was mostly intact, which told us something important: this ship hadn't died in a disaster. It had died of old age, the same way its crew apparently had. The consoles were dark, obviously. 900 years of power failure will do that, but when Yosk got the auxiliary cell we'd brought hooked into what looked like the primary data core, something in the ship's ancient bones shuddered awake. Lights flickered. Somewhere deep in the hull, a system that had been asleep for the better part of a millennium groaned back to a half-life, and a screen in front of the captain's chair, which, mercifully, was empty, blinked to life with a low hum. "That shouldn't work," Yosk said. "Humans built things to last, apparently. Humans built things 900 years ago. That console is older than my entire concept of civilization." A file list populated the screen. "Logs, hundreds of them, spanning, and I want you to sit with this number for a second, 631 years. Not the 900 the ship had been drifting. 631 years of active logs, made by a crew that everyone back home, if there had been a back home to check, would have written off as dead within the first month. I opened the earliest one, mostly because I am, against my better judgment, a curious creature. A voice filled the bridge. Male, human, tired but steady, the kind of voice that sounds like it's already decided panicking won't help. Captain's log, day 1. Hyperdrives fried. Not the fun kind of fried, the kind where the engineer looked at it and just started laughing. We are, best as I can figure, a very long way from anywhere anyone is looking for us. Comms are down. Repairs are not happening anytime soon, maybe not ever. Crew's scared. I'm scared. Going to go pretend I'm not now. More tomorrow. I looked at Yosk. Yosk looked at me. That's it? Yosk said. Ship's dying, they're stranded 1,000 years from rescue, and he logs it like he's complaining about a delayed shipment. I mean, I said, to be fair, he probably was also complaining about a delayed shipment. Everything on that ship was delayed. By 900 years. I don't know why I found that funny. Maybe it was nerves. Maybe it's a vectory thing, the way we laugh at the exact moment something stops being funny at all, just to keep from doing something worse. Either way, Yosk didn't laugh. Yosk just stared at the screen like it had personally offended him. We kept listening. We probably shouldn't have. Salvage protocol says grab the valuable bits and go, don't linger, don't get attached, a wreck is a wreck, but neither of us moved to leave, and eventually I stopped pretending I was going to. The logs kept coming. Not screaming. Not despair. Just, life. A chief engineer logging that they'd successfully converted a cargo bay into a hydroponics farm using scavenged parts and what sounded like sheer spite. A doctor logging the ship's first birth in captivity, 3 years after the crash, and noting dryly that the kid had her father's stubborn chin and everyone's collective terrible luck. A logistics officer logging, decades later, that they'd worked out a sustainable recycling loop for water, air, and waste that could, in theory, keep the ship's population alive indefinitely, so long as nobody did anything stupid. They named a section of the ship, Downtown. They held something they called Founders' Day, an anniversary of the crash, which had apparently transformed over the generations from a day of mourning into something closer to a holiday, with food and music logged in cheerful, exhausted detail by whoever was captain at the time. There were, over 6 centuries, 11 different captains. 11. All of them born on that ship. None of them had ever seen a sky that wasn't a bulkhead ceiling. They just kept going, Yosk said quietly. It was the first time all day his voice hadn't had an edge of complaint in it. They just kept going, I agreed. We found the nursery 2 decks down. Small drawings were still stuck to the walls with what I assume was some kind of adhesive that had, impressively, also survived 9 centuries, children's drawings, crayon or its equivalent, of stars and planets and what might have been the ship itself, rendered in the wobbly confident lines of kids who'd never seen the things they were drawing except in old pictures and stories. One drawing showed a green planet with a yellow sun. A child born and raised entirely inside a dead ship had drawn a picture of a world she would never see, based on nothing but what her grandparents had told her it used to look like. I had to stop looking at that one for a minute. Further along, in what used to be a secondary cargo bay, we found the graveyard. That's the only word for it. Rows of markers, hand-carved from scavenged hull plating, each one with a name and 2 dates scratched into the metal with what must have been enormous patience and a very dull tool. Hundreds of names. Generations of them, stacked neatly in a room that had never once seen sunlight, tended by people who had never once seen sunlight either. I don't understand it, Yosk said, and for once there was no sarcasm in him at all, just something raw. A ship dies. The crew should die with it. That is how it works. That is how it is supposed to work. You get a distress beacon out, you wait, and if nobody comes, you accept it and it's over quickly, with dignity, and you don't do this. You don't build a graveyard. You don't have children. You don't hold a holiday to celebrate the day everything went wrong. Yeah, I said. I don't understand it either. I think that's the moment it stopped being funny to me, even in the nervous, deflecting way it had been funny before. I've salvaged 100 wrecks. I've seen crews who panicked, crews who fought each other over the last of the air, crews who simply gave up and let the cold take them because what else was there to do? I had never, not once, found a wreck that had turned into a civilization. The final log was dated 900 years ago, to the week, as best the ship's decayed internal clock could tell us. Not 631 years after the crash, that's when the population had peaked, apparently, before something we never fully pieced together, a plague or a slow systems failure or simply the numbers running out, thinned them down generation by generation until there was one log left, and one voice. She sounded young. Younger than I expected, given she introduced herself as the last one. This is, I think, the final log of the Meridian. My name doesn't matter much, but I'll say it anyway. Del Okoye. 14th generation. Might be the last generation, unless whoever's listening to this counts. If you're listening to this, hello. I'm sorry we're not around anymore to say it in person. Ship still running, more or less, thanks to about 400 years of people a lot smarter than me keeping it alive out of pure stubbornness. There's a seed bank in Cargo 3. There's 4 centuries of technical schematics, medical records, and star charts in this data core, all of it yours if you want it, no charge, professional courtesy from one spacefaring species to whoever finds us. We didn't make it home. But we made a home. I think that counts for something. Anyway. Ship's cold and I'm tired, and there's nobody left to relieve me for the next shift, so I suppose I'll just stay. Take care of whatever's out there. We did our best with what we had in here. The log ended. The bridge went quiet except for the low hum of the console, patiently waiting for instructions that would never come again. Neither of us said anything for a long moment. Well, Yosk said eventually, voice thick in a way I decided not to comment on. That's not what I expected from a cursed ghost ship. Me neither. I take back what I said about it being cursed. You should. It's not cursed. It's just. I looked around the bridge, at the frost, at the empty captain's chair, at 900 years of silence sitting patiently on top of 600 years of defiant, stubborn, completely unreasonable human persistence. It's just really, really annoying that they made surviving impossible circumstances look this easy. It did not look easy, roll. It looked like they never once considered not doing it. That's what I mean. We took the data core. We took the seed bank. We logged the coordinates, filed the report, and, against every salvage instinct either of us has ever had, left the graveyard exactly as we found it, markers and all, because it turns out there is a limit to how much of a person you're willing to be for a modest resale profit, and finding 6 centuries of somebody else's family had apparently found mine. The fleet didn't believe the report at first. Humans had been quiet for so long that most of the sector had filed them under, probably extinct, definitely not our problem. A crew surviving for 600 years inside a dead ship, having children, holding holidays, building a graveyard by hand, and then calmly logging their own extinction like they were leaving a note for the next tenant, that doesn't fit anyone's tidy little theory about how a species is supposed to end. Which is, I suspect, exactly why it happened. Humans, from everything we found on that ship, never seemed to have a firm grasp on how things were supposed to go. They just kept adjusting the plan until the plan involved staying alive, whatever staying alive happened to require, for as long as it could possibly be required. We towed the Meridian back for proper study, eventually. Somebody smarter than me will spend the next decade going through those logs. I don't envy them the graveyard chapter. Before we left, Yosk found one last thing tucked in a supply locker near the mess hall, a small handwritten sign, laminated, faded but legible, clearly moved from captain to captain to captain over the centuries, propped up near what used to be the coffee station. It said, "Still here. Bring snacks." Yosk read it 3 times before he laughed, and once he started, he couldn't really stop, and honestly, neither could I. It wasn't really funny. I want to be clear about that. Nothing about a graveyard is funny. But sometimes the only response left to something that enormous is to laugh anyway, because the alternative is thinking too hard about the fact that somewhere out there, humanity is apparently still out there, still stubborn, still refusing to take a hint from the universe, and still, in some form, bringing snacks. We didn't find any humans alive on the Meridian. But I'll tell you this much, after 900 years of silence from Terran space, I'm no longer willing to bet against them existing somewhere. 6 centuries of graveyards and birthday parties and hand-drawn planets taught me that much, at least. Somewhere out there, something human is still going. I'd put money on it. Just, bring snacks.